Benny Goodman's main legacy was to firmly establish jazz and plant it into the vocabulary of global pop culture. In this sense, he was one of the most important musicians of the 20th century. But how did he get there? Goodman was the son of Russian Jewish immigrants who'd moved to Chicago at the turn of the century. From a very early age, he showed an incredible proficiency playing in the synagogue on that most Jewish of all instruments, the clarinet. But he didn't want to play classical music, because as he was growing up in the 20s, Chicago was taken by storm by this new style of music coming from New Orleans, jazz. All the jazz greats like Louis Armstrong had been moving up north to escape the harsh living conditions and the Jim Crow laws down south. So Goodman starts turning his clarinet to jazz, playing in nightclubs and speakeasies with local bands. And this is something I love about jazz, right? Because Goodman isn't playing the sax or the trumpet, he's playing the clarinet, an instrument from his own Jewish heritage. And jazz, in that sense, it's like a metaphor for America, you know? Everyone contributes a part of their own culture and their past to this melting pot. And the whole art form emerges from that mixture as something greater than the sum of its parts. It's brilliant. And that's what America should be. But despite my idealism, at that time in the early 30s, the bands were still segregated. So this meant that there were a lot of all-white bands playing this, quote, sweet jazz, which was this very saccharine and melodic, romantic style of jazz, totally lacking the rhythmic punch of what they called the hot style. Yet these white bands were really popular on the radio because, guess what, most of Middle America and people spending money on records were white. Benny Goodman's first great intuition was to say screw all this and to hire a black guy called Fletcher Henderson to write his arrangements. Now, Fletcher Henderson wasn't just black, he was also one of the greatest band leaders in America. But he had fallen on hard times, so Benny Goodman saw his chance and took it. So Benny Goodman's band became one of the first white bands to play in that hot, sweaty style that could get your heart really pumping. That incredible force and swing of real black jazz, but with all the open doors of a white band. So next thing you know, he's got a gig on an NBC radio show based in New York called Let's Dance, and every week playing well past midnight with the help of Fletcher Henderson, but also the thunderous Gene Krupa on drums, who just belted out the hardest rhythms you could imagine at the time. Benny Goodman's band is playing the hottest tunes in jazz to an audience all over America. There's a really cool story I love about Benny Goodman's final explosion onto the national stage. In 1935, his band was still kind of struggling, so his manager booked him on a national tour. Goodman's band went across the whole country by car and it was a disaster. At every stop in places like Iowa and Oklahoma, he'd be booed. Because he was playing the hot style, but these white audience wanted that boring, romantic, sweet jazz. None of this, quote, Negro music that he was playing. And it kind of traumatized him, so much so he actually considered quitting his career. Finally, after a grueling tour, the band reached Los Angeles, where they were meant to play at a club called the Palomar, a concert that was actually going to be broadcast live on TV and radio. It was the final stop to a shitty tour. And as the gig starts, Benny, traumatized, starts playing some romantic ballad. The audience response is tepid to say the least, and soon people in the audience start leaving. During the interlude, the band is dejected, but the drummer, Gene Krupa, goes up to Benny and says, "If we're gonna die, Benny, let's die playing our own thing." And so they get back on stage and they pull out those hot arrangements by Fletcher Henderson. And as soon as they start playing, the audience explodes. See, these people had all been listening to his radio show, which in New York was airing after midnight, but because of the time difference, in LA, they were listening to it prime time. These people were huge fans of the real Benny Goodman. So the concert was a massive success. And because it was broadcast live on TV and radio, the next days, Benny Goodman and this new hot style, which he called swing, was all anyone was talking about all over America. The age of swing had arrived.